Something happened on May 12th, 2026 that the laptop industry has not seen in 15 years. Not a new processor, not a thinner chassis, not another incremental upgrade to an operating system that has spent the last decade adding features nobody asked for. Oh, what happened was a direct attack. Calculated, timed to the day, and delivered with the kind of confidence that only comes from years of preparation. Google walked onto a virtual stage, announced a premium laptop platform backed by 5 of the world's biggest PC manufacturers, powered by an operating system that has never run on a laptop before, and with artificial intelligence embedded not as a feature you can switch on and off, but as the operating logic of the entire device. They called it the Googlebook. And then the story got strange. Because while Google was announcing the most serious challenge to Windows laptop dominance in a generation, Microsoft was spending that same week doing something that should have been impossible to imagine just 2 years earlier. It was quietly removing artificial intelligence from its own products, pulling Copilot out of apps it had spent 2024 and 2025 aggressively injecting it into, walking back the exact strategy that the Googlebook is built entirely around. One company went all in, the other simultaneously folded. To understand how we arrived at this specific collision, and what it actually means for anyone who owns a laptop or is about to buy one, you have to go back 15 years. Not because the history is decorative, but because the Googlebook's announcement date was chosen deliberately to make a point about it. The first Chromebook shipped on May 11th, 2011. Google announced the Googlebook on May 12th, 2026, 15 years and 1 day. That gap was not a coincidence. It was a message. The era that began on that date is over, and we are the ones ending it. The Chromebook was a deliberately modest device, a laptop that ran Chrome, operated through a browser, booted in seconds, and did not pretend to be anything other than what it was. For people who lived in web applications and did not need legacy software installed locally, it was genuinely excellent. In education especially, it found an audience that turned into a dominant market position. At its peak, Chromebooks held more than 60% of the United States K through 12 laptop market. That is not a niche, that is a category. But the Chromebook had a ceiling built into its architecture and everyone knew it. The app ecosystem depended almost entirely on web technology. When Google eventually brought Android apps to Chrome OS, they ran inside a compatibility layer that made them feel grafted on, sluggish in ways that betrayed their origins, unfinished in ways that reminded users they were running phone software on a laptop. For a decade, the Chromebook story was a story of capable hardware held back by software that was never quite enough to compete at the premium end of the market where Apple and Microsoft operated without serious challenge. Google had been signaling the end of that story for roughly a year before the Googlebook had a name. In July 2025, a senior Google executive told a major tech publication that Google was combining Chrome OS and Android into a single unified platform. Those 12 words were a decade-long wish finally confirmed. The Android and Chrome OS developer communities had been expressing this desire since the two operating systems first began to overlap in Google's portfolio. At Qualcomm's Snapdragon Summit in September 2025, the platform was teased again alongside Google's hardware chief and Qualcomm's CEO, making clear that Qualcomm's ARM-based silicon would power the first wave of devices, and that launch was coming in 2026. Google was not hiding what it was building. It was building anticipation deliberately, the kind of deliberate anticipation that only makes sense if you are genuinely confident in what you're about to show. The Googlebook does not update the Chromebook story, it replaces it. The device runs what Google internally called Android OS during development, rebuilt from the ground up as a desktop operating system based on the Android 17 technology stack, with a custom window manager, native multitasking, proper keyboard and trackpad support, and Gemini AI embedded at the operating system level. Not as an app, not as a chatbot you access through a button in the corner of your screen, as the intelligence layer running underneath everything the device does. This distinction is the one that matters most, and it is worth sitting with for a moment. On a Copilot Plus PC running Windows 11, Copilot is an AI assistant you can summon. On a Googlebook, Gemini is the operating logic. The difference is the same as the difference between a car that has navigation available as a downloadable app and a car where the navigation system is part of the dashboard, understands where you're going from context, and starts routing before you have typed a word. One model treats AI as an optional tool, the other treats AI as the foundation from which everything else is built. The feature set Google announced at launch reflects exactly that architectural philosophy. The first headline capability is something called Magic Pointer, and it is the feature that drew the strongest immediate reaction from technology press for a reason that is easy to understand once you see it. Your cursor on a traditional laptop has done one thing since the mouse was invented. It points. The right click was the last meaningful evolution of the cursor's capabilities, and that happened decades ago. Magic Pointer, developed in collaboration with Google's DeepMind team, makes the cursor context-aware using Gemini intelligence. When you hover over something on screen, the system reads what is under the cursor and surfaces relevant actions. I'll point at a date in an email, and it offers to add it to your calendar. Point at two images side by side, a photo of your living room and a picture of furniture you are considering, and it visualizes them together in real time. Point at a paragraph in a document, and it offers to summarize, rewrite, or expand it without you ever opening a separate AI panel. The AI is not in a sidebar waiting to be called. It is in the cursor itself. Every element on screen becomes a potential interaction point with the intelligence layer. That is not an incremental upgrade to the laptop interface. That is a different model of how humans and computers communicate. The second major capability is called Create Your Widget. Users describe what they want in natural language, suggest 3 high-protein meal prep recipes each week, or show me today's top headlines from my 5 favorite sources, and Gemini builds a live interactive widget that sits on the desktop. No configuration screens, no coding, just a sentence, and the device builds the interface you described. The operating system responds to intentions rather than requiring users to navigate menus designed for intentions the software's original designers anticipated. The third feature is quick access, which is particularly significant for the 3.5 billion people already living inside the Android ecosystem. From a Googlebook, users can browse and pull files stored on their Android phone directly through the laptop's file browser without transferring them. So without cables, without sync software, without any of the friction that has historically made managing a phone and a laptop simultaneously more effort than it should be. The phone's storage appears in the laptop's file system. Files exist on one device and are reachable from both. The fourth capability, Cast My Apps, allows Android applications running on your phone to be opened and used on the Googlebook screen, not as a mirrored version of the phone's display, but as the app running in a proper desktop window on the laptop. Apple introduced iPhone mirroring to Mac in 2024. Google has now built its own version and extended it further by combining application streaming with the direct file access that Quick Access enables. The cross-device integration is not a standalone feature. It is a coherent architecture designed to make the Googlebook feel like a natural extension of a device its users already carry everywhere. Then there's the hardware story, which tells its own version of how seriously the industry is taking this platform. 5 of the world's largest PC manufacturers, Acer, Asus, Dell, HP, and Lenovo, committed to building Googlebook devices arriving in fall 2026. Every Googlebook will carry a signature design element called the glow bar, an illuminated strip at the hinge that lights up when the device powers on, a design callback to the original Pixelbook. Processing options will include Qualcomm Snapdragon chips alongside MediaTek and Intel alternatives, meaning the Googlebook will span both ARM and x86 architectures rather than committing to a single silicon strategy. And according to Google's own senior director, Googlebooks are positioned deliberately at the premium end of the laptop market, competing directly with Apple's MacBook lineup and Microsoft's premium Windows machines, not with budget education devices. Chromebooks will continue to exist for the affordable segment. The Googlebook is aimed somewhere else entirely. Now, the Microsoft side of this story, because the timing of what Microsoft was doing in the same week as the Googlebook announcement, is the part that requires the most careful attention. Microsoft had spent 2024 and 2025 putting Copilot into Windows 11 with an intensity that approached saturation. Notepad got Copilot, the Snipping Tool got Copilot, Photos got Copilot, the Widgets board got Copilot, File Explorer got Copilot. A dedicated Copilot key appeared on keyboards of Copilot Plus PCs, replacing a key that users actually used regularly. The philosophy driving all of it was explicit. AI should be ambient, woven into every surface of the operating system, always present and always available. Users responded by naming what they were experiencing. Windows Copilot. Everywhere became a running description of a strategy that felt less like a thoughtful product philosophy and more like a company determined to prove a thesis regardless of whether users were asking for it. Windows Recall. The feature Microsoft had marketed as the flagship capability of Copilot Plus PCs, which captured screenshots of screen activity every few seconds and built a searchable timeline of everything a user had ever done on the computer, was met with immediate and intense privacy backlash when it was previewed in 2024 that Microsoft had to delay its rollout by an entire year while rebuilding the security architecture around it from scratch. A former Microsoft vice president who had spent 12 years at the company, including 4 years as technical advisor directly to CEO Satya Nadella before later working at Google, and Meta, published a detailed assessment in May 2026. His conclusion was direct. Microsoft had missed the AI wave in computing the same way it had previously missed the internet and mobile revolutions. The numbers he cited were damaging in their specificity. Much fewer than 3% of paying Microsoft 365 users were actively using Copilot, despite Microsoft having pre-deployed it directly into the Windows taskbar and across the entire Office suite. Out of approximately 450 million Microsoft 365 users, the company had converted roughly 15 million to paid Copilot seats. That is a 96.7% rejection rate for premium AI features, against a backdrop of capital expenditure projected to exceed $80 billion in fiscal 2025, most of it allocated to Azure AI infrastructure. The mismatch between that level of investment and that level of adoption was, in his assessment, alarming. Microsoft's response to that data had already begun before the Googlebook was announced. Starting in March 2026, Copilot integrations were removed from Photos, from Notepad, from the Widgets panel, from the Snipping Tool. The executive Microsoft had appointed to oversee Copilot posted publicly that it was critical to remove Copilot from places where it did not deliver on its promise. And then deleted the post. Deleting the post did not delete the admission. The rollback continued regardless. By May 2026, Microsoft had announced a reorganization of Copilot into 4 separate divisions, acknowledging that the various Copilot implementations across Windows, Office, Xbox, and Edge had produced inconsistent experiences and confused users. The Copilot key on keyboards was confirmed to be remappable. Xbox Copilot development was being wound down. Early Windows 11 insider builds were testing a movable and resizable taskbar, a change so fundamental to the operating system's interface that it signaled the rethinking was happening at a structural level, not just in surface-level feature cleanup. And into that exact moment, Microsoft actively dismantling the AI laptop pitch it had spent 2 years building, Google announced the Googlebook. The collision was not accidental. Google had been watching Microsoft's AI strategy generate user resistance for months and chose to launch its counter-platform at precisely the moment when the contrast would be most vivid. The obvious challenge worth addressing directly is whether the Googlebook faces the same structural problem that defeated Copilot Plus. If consumers rejected AI everywhere on Windows, why would they embrace an operating system where AI is not optional, not removable, not adjacent to the experience, but constitutive of it? The answer lies in understanding why users rejected Copilot Plus specifically, and whether those reasons apply to the Googlebook. Copilot Plus added new AI features on top of an existing operating system. Users who bought a Copilot Plus PC got Windows 11, the same operating system they already knew, with the same app ecosystem, the same familiarity, plus AI features bolted into interfaces that were not designed for them. Copilot and Notepad did not make Notepad more useful. It made Notepad feel like a product being used to demonstrate a corporate strategy rather than serve the person typing in it. The backlash was partly about the AI, and partly, perhaps more significantly, about the execution. The AI felt like an intrusion into spaces that were not asking for it. The Googlebook does not put AI on top of an existing operating system. It is an AI-native operating system designed from a clean slate, running on Android's technology stack, where the AI capabilities are expressed through interfaces built specifically for them. Magic. Pointer was designed for the Googlebook. The widget creation system was designed for the Googlebook. The phone integration architecture was designed around Gemini from the start. There is no pre-AI Googlebook experience to compare against, no established baseline that the AI is intruding upon. Users who choose a Googlebook are opting into an entirely new computing paradigm from the first moment they power the device on. The expectations are set correctly from the beginning. Whether that distinction holds up in practice will be determined when the first devices ship in fall 2026 and independent reviews begin appearing. If Gemini's suggestions are slow, irrelevant, or intrusive in the moments when users reach for them, the Googlebook will face its own version of the backlash that followed Copilot, regardless of how cleanly it was designed. The architectural difference between bolting AI onto an old system and building AI into a new one is only meaningful if the AI itself works well in real-world use. There's also the Android ecosystem argument, which may be the Googlebook's most powerful structural advantage over anything Microsoft can offer in response. There are roughly 3.5 billion active Android devices in the world. Every person using one of those devices already has applications, data, media, and workflows living inside the Android ecosystem. Every one of those users is a potential Googlebook customer who walks in with their entire digital life already compatible with the device they are being asked to buy. The seamless integration between Android phones and the Googlebook, the file access, the application streaming, the shared Gemini intelligence layer is not merely a convenience, it is a lock-in strategy as structurally powerful as anything Microsoft built with Office compatibility in the 1990s. Analyst Maribel Lopez of Lopez Research framed the competitive picture clearly. The Googlebook will not kill Windows, but it will take market share from the edges. For the roughly 80% of laptop users who never install a legacy Win32 application, Android is already sufficient for everything they do on a computer. If Google can deliver that experience with a superior AI integration at a competitive premium price point, Microsoft's defensible territory shrinks to the 20% of users who genuinely need Windows for legacy software, enterprise tooling, or specialized applications that do not exist outside the Windows ecosystem. Microsoft's defense against this scenario rests on three things. Windows on ARM, which brings Windows 11 to energy-efficient processors with improved x86 application compatibility through a significantly upgraded emulation layer, addressing the battery life and performance gap that ARM-based devices have historically held over traditional x86 machines. Enterprise depth, where Microsoft's integration with Azure, Active Directory, Intune, SharePoint, and the broader Microsoft 365 administrative infrastructure represents tooling that Android cannot match at the organizational level, and which has driven Windows 11 past 500 million active devices on the strength of enterprise refresh cycles. And the pivot toward AI agents rather than ambient AI, repositioning Copilot not as a button embedded in every app, but as a system capable of executing complex multi-step tasks autonomously across services, a model that requires less from the user and delivers more visible value than Copilot and Notepad ever could. Whether that pivot produces something that changes the competitive picture before Googlebook devices are in consumers' hands is the question the next 12 months will answer. Microsoft knows it is behind. The internal reorganization, the feature rollbacks, the deleted social media posts, and the careful language of corporate blog posts written to signal accountability without admitting failure all paint a picture of a company that understands the moment it is in. What Google has done with the Googlebook is fundamentally different from every previous attempt to challenge the Windows laptop's position in the premium market. It is not cheaper than Windows. It is not aimed at students. It is not positioned as a good enough alternative for people who do not need a real computer. It is backed by the same manufacturers who built the vast majority of Windows PCs for 30 years, companies whose entire business model depends on reading the laptop market correctly, and whose decision to commit to the Googlebook from day one without. Waiting for market validation is itself a form of verdict. It is built on the operating system already running in the pockets of 3.5 billion people. And it arrives at a moment when the leading AI laptop strategy from the dominant platform has just been publicly walked back by the company that built it. The Chromebook spent 15 years defining what browser-first computing meant. The Googlebook is Google's attempt to define what AI-first computing means, before anyone else gets to define it instead, and with enough hardware and ecosystem backing to make the definition stick. On the same WU. Google planted that flag. Microsoft was removing Copilot buttons from Notepad, reorganizing the team that spent 2 years putting them there and communicating in the carefully measured language of deleted tweets and corporate blog posts that the strategy it had committed to most publicly was the one it was now most visibly retreating from. One company declared the future. The other was busy explaining why its version of the future had not worked. The industry is watching. The OEMs have already voted. The consumers will decide in fall 2026, and the platform war for the next era of personal computing has a new contender at the table with something no previous challenger to Windows dominance ever brought: the world's most widely used operating system and a cursor that thinks,